Hello, Buckeye fans. Welcome back to week 2 here at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center after Ohio State's big win against Texas on Saturday. The Buckeyes now prepare for Grambling State. We just got done with Ryan Day's press conference. Dave, there was no mention of Grambling State during that press conference by anyone in the room. Was that the surprise to you at all?
Mildly. Usually there's one token question when we have a week like this. And sometimes people, I've been on the beat so long, I've seen reporters slip up and say things like, okay, heading into the off week, when they have like a game against a lesser opponent, they don't mean it's an actual off week. Then the coach has to be like, this isn't an off week. Yeah. So it wasn't even that. There was no mention of Grambling. The band is coming. Steve Hellwagon did a story this morning. We assumed the band was going to come from Grambling. But then Steve reached out to their SID, heard nothing. But a few minutes ago, it was confirmed the band is coming. The band is on the field, but no questions about Grambling. Yeah, it mildly surprised me. I thought there'd be like one.
Yeah. Not only will Ohio State's band and Grambling's band be there, but the alumni band, Ohio State's alumni band, also performing on Saturday.
This is a perfect game to like really focus on the bands.
Yes. All right, but let's talk Saturday, Texas. I know you did what we learned live. You had me on there, but now with more time to sort of dissect. I know you weren't on the BM5 on Monday. What was your the thing you liked the most coming out of that game?
Yeah.
And the thing you liked the least?
Yeah.
And you can't just say that they won because that's too easy.
Yeah, specifically. Yeah, I mean, it's easy, but like I did a piece on the site yesterday looking at like the 3 biggest things I learned. And like, number one, this is the most obvious one, and this is the one I like the most, is the way this defense looks and how creative Matt Patricia is being. And I think it's been like maybe an underreported story that like everybody talks about Ohio State's got a new defensive coordinator. They do. The entire rest of the defensive staff from the national championship team is still intact, and it's one heck of a good staff with Larry Johnson, James Laurinaitis, Matt Guerrieri, and Tim Walton. Then you bring in Matt Patricia, and everything he's doing with the new wrinkles, he didn't have to reinvent the wheel. He just had to come in and put his stamp on it. And man, has he. We saw things like there'd be times like on passing downs, they didn't have a defensive tackle on the field. They'd have like 3 defensive ends basically playing like D tackle. And then they had like 2 line, like Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese basically coming off the edge, 6 DBs on the field, including Devin Sanchez, moving guys around. You can see Arch was very confused before the snap. So I really like what Matt Patricia and the staff did, but also the talent on this defense I really like. I think that's something people, we look at only 3 returning starters, which is true, but all 3 of those guys are studs, led by the best defensive player in college football in Caleb Downs. And then you look at all these other guys that aren't returning starters, but like Caden Curry, Kenyatta Jackson, Caden McDonald, Edric Houston. These are guys that like you knew were ready to go. Arvell Reese, Jermaine Matthews, guys. A lot of those guys played a lot on the national championship team. So a little bit misleading when you look at only 3 returning starters. I loved what I saw out of the defense. Okay, what didn't I like? In big games, I'm of the opinion the quarterback needs to steal a first down or 2 with his legs. And Will Howard was great at that. Kyle McCord never ran at all. He had negative rushing yards. Now, they should include sacks for your rushing yards, but they do in college. He had negative rushing yards for the entire season. Didn't score any touchdowns rushing. And Ohio State was one of the worst, short yardage goal line teams in the country. Now, they did get a 4th and goal from the 2 and got it in. That's huge. But the lack of any threat from the quarterback run concerns me, because when they play certain teams, they're going to, and Ohio State doesn't have any threat to run from the quarterback. They're just going to sell out to stop the running backs or the wide receivers or the tight ends. Now, maybe Ohio State just put that in their back pocket and they're going to use it because Julian's not a statue. But it just reminds me of when CJ was here, Pat. Like when we didn't see CJ Stroud run the ball till really his last game against Georgia, and he showed he was effective at it. So, again, I don't need Julian Sand running the ball as much as Will Howard did. I don't need him being the Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. Nothing like that. Nothing even approaching that. But like once or twice a game, I need him stealing a first down and or in the goal line when they're selling up to stop the running back, pull it and go get yourself an easy touchdown. Again, nitpicking. You beat Texas. I'm nitpicking here because Ohio State could have, if they were a little bit more aggressive, they could have won that game by 2 touchdowns. But I'm most impressed with the defense. The lack of a quarterback run concerns me a little bit.
Yeah, and there was some conversation on the front row on our message board about this, and I wondered how quickly this would become a topic, because it looks a lot like CJ, where there are opportunities like that. The last drive, that I think it was 2nd down, when Julian rolls out and he just ends up throwing it into the dirt. Like, you could pick up 8 yards there, no problem. But I think it's going to be a lot of the same conversation we had with CJ up until that Georgia game, of just like, he's not going to do it, and maybe Julian will do it more. Somebody did post on our message board, and I thought this was interesting, that Julian was known for running towards contact in high school. And I could very much have seen this staff being like, hey, don't do that. Like, we can't have you,
Right.
against college-sized defensive linemen, Big Ten, Texas is. I could see them not wanting that at all.
And I am not advocating for that, just to be clear.
Right.
I can't stress once or twice a game enough.
Yeah.
And don't go once or twice unless it's like you have to go win the game and you have to get that first down. Yeah, I don't need him to like go taking on linebackers in the hole or anything like that.
Yeah, and I just wonder if that's his nature to, want to be physical in the run. And so, maybe they work on that and eventually he starts to do it a little more. But I agree with you. My two things, not too dissimilar from what you said. Arvell Reese, for me, he was just a standout in this game. And I thought it didn't surprise me. I think we both were very high on Arvell Reese and, excited, but just his understanding of the game is so much better than it was early last season when he was it looked like playing on instinct and athleticism. So for me, the way he played, the different ways he got used, they lined him up all over the place. A lot of guys lined up all over the place, to be fair. The thing that I didn't like as much, similar, just the run game, like that needs some work. And look, Texas's front was very good, better than I expected given their changes on the interior. But Ohio State ran it up the middle, I thought, too much. Didn't try and get, especially James Peoples, out on the edge. When they pulled guys, it wasn't as effective. Now, they did get some gotta-have-it plays. You mentioned that 4th and 2. That's important. They had a couple others. But I think over the next couple weeks, you need to build that confidence, both with the running backs and the offensive line, to go forward. Let's go back to what Ryan Day was talking about today. What were the biggest standout points for you from this press conference where, again, we did not talk about the upcoming opponent at all?
Yeah, I think he basically said, I'm paraphrasing, that like they would have been more aggressive. He still thinks they should have been more aggressive. For example, to use one of his examples, this wasn't the only one. The final drive of the game for Ohio State, they get the ball. Texas finally scores. Took them 56 minutes to score. It's 14-7. Ohio State gets the ball back. Now, you're in a little tricky spot. Your defense is dominating, even though they just gave up a touchdown. So you don't want to do anything crazy, but you don't want to go ultra conservative. In retrospect, he felt like they were too conservative there. But if on that second down, if Julian just takes off and runs, I think a lot of that is Ryan telling him not to do it, because we saw it with 2 years with CJ.
Yeah.
We saw it with Kyle. Not that Kyle would have been an effective runner. Chip Kelly's always been huge on the QB run. So the one time in the Ryan Day era they've really relied on it was like when Chip Kelly was here. So it's like, I wonder if it's Ryan telling them not to do it. But like, yeah, so they should have been more aggressive. But he basically said, like, we would have been more aggressive. We would have opened up the playbook more if our defense was like in trouble, But like, when your defense is just wrecking shop, you're going to be just naturally a little bit more conservative on offense, especially when you have a quarterback making his first ever start. So, yeah, I liked his answers there. You can tell that they looked at it there. You know what? We understand why we were conservative, but we were too conservative is kind of what my takeaway.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and he stressed this last week, he stressed it this week, was win the game the surest way possible. And that is not having mistakes and playing good defense. And I think they knew going into the game they could rely on that defense, or at least were as confident as they could be, having not played anybody, given the new faces on that side of the ball. He did talk about, and you mentioned it, the staff around Matt Patricia, which we obviously knew about. But yeah, I think if you needed to open it up more, I think they certainly could have. But it was clear pretty early in that game that it was going to be a defensive battle. Mm-hmm. I think we talked about this on What We Learned. We all knew that this wasn't going to be some like Big 12 Texas-Oklahoma shootout, right? This was going to be a hard – I mean, even looking back to last year's game, you've got the touchdown, obviously the Jack Sawyer one, but also the big play from Travion Henderson. Take that away, it's even more of a low-scoring game, and that wasn't high scoring. So I think what these two teams kind of are, and I think you'll see the Buckeyes get more explosive. I do wonder, going back to the quarterback run, like the way that Justin Fields was banged up, obviously the Clemson game when he has to leave, but at the end of those seasons, he was banged up a little bit, both years.
Yep.
And in 2020, obviously a little different. You don't play as many games. But I do wonder if that has changed the way Ryan looks at, using the quarterback during the regular season in that way. Because even Will Howard, like he ran, but not as much as I think we probably thought, given what he did at Kansas State.
Yeah, he didn't run as much. You're right. He didn't run as much as he did at K-State, but he was so effective at it.
Yes.
I believe he scored 7 rushing touchdowns. Like Ohio State went from one of the worst short yardage, red zone, scoring touchdowns in the red zone teams in the country. So everything, short yardage, goal line, everything you can think of. They were one of the worst teams in the country in 2023, and they were one of the best, if not the best, last year because Will Howard was very effective in short yardage. And even when he would hand off to one of the great running backs. A lot of times Quinshawn would be in there in short yardage. The defense had to account for him, and that's what I saw when CJ was here. And even Justin's talked about this. He's like, I didn't run. He's like, I ran a decent amount at Ohio State. He's like, I didn't run as much as I wanted to.
Yeah, he could have.
Because coach was telling me not to run as much. Now, in 2019, I get it. Who were the backups in 2019? Chugs and Gunnar Hoke. Nothing against those young men, but I can see Ryan Day saying, okay, let's keep you in bubble wrap as much as possible. This year depends on how you feel about Lincoln Keenholz. If you take him at his word, this is a close battle, then he shouldn't have that. You still want to keep Julian healthy.
Right.
But, is it real? Again, I'm talking about once or twice a game. Once or twice a game, go pick up a cheap first down. Make that defensive coordinator just do a face palm. Maybe we had him, and he gets a cheap first down. It's the worst thing for a defensive coordinator. So, don't major in it, but they've got to do it a little bit. It has to be a threat. Otherwise, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage numbers-wise because you're basically playing 10 on 11. Defense has 10, or defense has 11. You have 10 because your quarterback is no threat to run.
Yeah, and especially some of those plays you saw Julian does run after he hands the ball off. And CJ would do that too. And that's when it occurred to me that people are going to get frustrated because CJ never kept it. And we'll see if Julian does. But the room is there if he does multiple times it was 8, 9, 10 yards were easy gets because everyone was so focused on the interior and the run game. Kenyatta Jackson. Ryan Day said he's working his way to play this week or something similar. I think we thought that based on what we talked about after the game, but good to hear. Sounds like he got his bell rung concussion. They're not going to use those words, but it does sound like even if he doesn't play this week, this is nothing to worry about.
Yeah, that's really good news. It's one of those things. Well, I was going to say it's probably one of those things. If they're playing Penn State this week, he could play, but maybe not if it's a concussion. You're right. In most cases now in football, if you have a concussion, you have to sit out the next week. Not always, but if that's what he had, if he was concussed, I'd be shocked if he plays this week with it being Grambling. And Ohio University is a solid team. They're the defending MAC champs. They got a really good quarterback in Parker Navarro. They gave Rutgers all they could handle. Yeah. But still, with this depth at DN, they go at least 5 deep, the Buckeyes do. I would hold Kenyatta out maybe the next 2 weeks, then give him the bye week and then get him ready for that game at Washington, which could be a little trickier than I think some believe. But good news, man. Good news, because when that happened, people are like, oh, crap, did we lose Kenyatta for the season? No, bell rung, to use an old school football term, as you said, and gave him some smelling salts. I'm kidding. And he'll be fine. Get out there. How many fingers am I holding up? Yeah. We've come a long way in that realm. But good to know, because he was the guy they were saying of all those 5 defensive ends that they really like. They're like, he's the guy that's really, really stepped up. He's waited his turn. He looks great. I always say he looks like he's straight out of central casting for a defensive end. 6'6", long arms, and now he's bulked up to 265. So I remember talking to him his year he was redshirting in 2022, Patrick. He was saying he was 235. And I'm like, well, that's not going to get it done at this level. And now you look at him, he comes off I would never wear a shirt ever if I was Kenyatta Jackson. He comes off the practice field, he's always shirtless, and he's just shredded. So
he looks like Dave.
Yeah, he looks like Patrick. He looks like 6'6" Patrick is what he looks like. He's just shredded, man. I don't know. Why do you wear shirts?
It's just for camera.
Okay. At home, you're just shirtless always?
Correct, all the time. Ryan Day was he said it multiple times about the need to improve. Yes, you just beat the number 1 team in the country, but there were so many things. He said he could give a list a mile long of things they need to improve on. I think it's always good when you can say, and he mentioned this, you can learn and grow from a win. We saw last year, though, when they really grew was after the losses. So
yes.
Any concern here that Ryan Day has this long list, but now you play teams, you're going to get away with some things against these next 2 opponents most likely. Just any concern about them growing despite the fact that, they won this game, given kind of what we saw a year ago. Yeah,
will they need it? They can, because they're going to say we're focused, we're working hard, everything. Right. And would it take a shocking loss at Washington?
And hope that doesn't happen.
Right? At Illinois, Illinois is ranked 12th. Not that. And I think that's going to help Ohio State. That this Illinois team is good. The fact that they were good last year, Illinois now they did win a lot of 1-score games last year. So you could say some people have argued their record was a little misleading last year, but still Illinois, one of the very few teams returning a veteran quarterback in Altmaier. I think Bielema's doing a good job there. So. But again, let's say they did lose a close one at Washington or Illinois. Would it take that to really get them fired up and go in the right direction? I don't know the answer to that. You would hope not, but I'm a huge believer in the mental side of sports, and that's a great point last year. Yeah. It took the Oregon game for the defense to have a come to Jesus moment. It took the Michigan game for really the whole team to have it, but really the offense mostly, because the defense really did its job for the most part in the Michigan game. It took those games to really wake them up, for lack of a better term. So hopefully not, but it's a little bit of a mild concern. I think the biggest concern is get this offensive line where they are a good run blocking offensive line. They can push even a great defensive line like Texas. They can get pushed, because I did not think the push was good. And then at punter, I want to see more out of the punter. The stats don't look bad from Joe McGuire, but a lot of times, and Aussie punters can do this, where a lot of times their kicks don't really have as much threat of like bouncing back. They get the roll. So you give him a little credit for it, but a lot of his good punts were like 25 yards in the air with a 20-yard roll. They've got to be better at the punter position than that. But long answer to your very simple question there.
Yeah, I agree on the punting. That was one of the things I had listed, depending on when I asked a question, but I was called on early, so I didn't want to go straight to punter. It was not asked about. I do think if it's a similar performance from Joe McGuire this week, that will get asked about, because you do have Nick McLarty, who we know can kick it long. The consistency, we assume, has gotten better, given he had his black stripe taken off during camp. So maybe do you roll him out a little bit here just to see, and by roll him out, I mean play him, just to see a little bit more from him in games and things like that. Because there could become a moment where, and I thought maybe a couple times against Texas where some of those punts, now you're right, they did roll, but teams will start to notice that, right? Of like, hey, let's catch this so that we don't lose 20 more yards. He already can't punt that far.
Right, let him try and kick it over our head.
Yeah,
exactly. Until we see him do it. Right.
I also think on the flip side, twice Brandon Innes allowed the punt to roll, and both times it landed, I believe one was at the 2, and then one was at the 7. And I'd like to see him get out on those, that whole put your heels on the 10 type of thing, and make sure it's going into the end zone. Punters have obviously gotten better. There was one time, I didn't notice this during the game. I noticed it during the rewatch. Jeremiah Smith fielded a punt.
Yeah.
Now he just fair caught it.
Oh, yeah. That I would put that in my notes, real quick, and then it was a fair catch, and I'm like, it was in my notes, but I don't even think I talked about it on the. I think I did mention it on the post-game show. But yeah, that's interesting to me, because that shows it's at least he's in the mix, or it wouldn't have been back during the Texas game just for bleeps and giggles.
Well, right. And
and Caleb Downs, you got to think, is somewhere in the pecking order too.
Yeah.
They just bring him out to return touchdowns, right?
Yeah. But yeah, the timing of that, I think it was either the second or third punt from Texas was second.
I believe it was the second.
Yes.
Second or third. You're right. It was early. And I was like, all the stuff because people during spring ball would be out here filming, be like, why are they putting JJ back there at punt return? People, I'm like, he's not going to be returning punts. There's just, whatever. And I was wrong. He hasn't returned one, but he was back to fair catch one. Yeah.
I wonder if that was recognizing, hey, we sort of need to get him going. He had the 2 drops. There clearly wasn't going to be a ton of passing in that game. Hey, maybe he can get a big one here. Just get him some touches that are outside of, throwing short passes and things like that. That'll be a big thing, I think, too. I don't know how much he's going to play, especially this week. But you want him, not necessarily to rack up the numbers, because I don't think Ohio State cares that much if he's in the Heisman conversation in week 2. But I do think you want to get him going in these next 2 games and, have the games we expect from a Jeremiah Smith. And that'll obviously help Julian Sayin and whatnot. You need to get this passing game going as well. So I don't know. This weekend will be interesting, because they should be able to kind of pick what they want to do. No offense to Grambling, it's just a different animal here. But they have to be ready. You can't look ahead to OU or Washington. So it should be interesting. And as you mentioned, the bands.
The bands are going to be great. Yeah, the HBCU bands are awesome. And seriously, growing up, they've done a great job the last 20 years or so of promoting HBCUs across the country. I know growing up, Grambling was the one that came to mind exactly first. They were the dynasty of the HBCUs. You think of Eddie Robinson. I think I'm getting that wrong. Was that where Eddie Robinson was? I believe so. Was Grambling? But I remember growing up. Not that I watched their games or anything, but I thought of HBCUs. I thought of Grambling. They were an absolute dynasty. So I think it was. I think that is where Eddie Robinson was.
They used to play at least for 4 or 5 years in a row. That Sunday of Labor Day weekend, before they started extending games out, they would play that Sunday afternoon. I remember watching them every year. It's just Grambling's on again. It was the only Grambling game I saw each season, but it was that Sunday of the holiday weekend. All right, we're going to wrap this up. Steve should have the video up from Ryan Day's press conference, and we will have plenty more today. We've already got some stuff up on the site, so stay tuned, and thank you all. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Pat. And it was Eddie Robinson, someone in the chat.